What the heck? This is Danny de Hek, your host. Let me entertain you. Like most entrepreneurial people, we always have a good story to tell. And I've got some really good topics that I'd like to cover in my personal podcast. I've done a wee bit of public speaking training, and one of the things I learnt was if you ever use a quote from somebody, you should give them credit for doing so. So I've just been listening to Crushing It by Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's inspired me to get out there and actually do my own podcast. And this is the very first one. Gary's said, don't worry about being perfect, be good today, basically. So if you're listening to this, Gary, I've just put your name on my contacts, and I'm hoping one day to get your email address and maybe your phone number as well. So the goal of me actually doing a podcast is I've always wanted to be an author, and I'm not a very good writer, which you'll find out as this podcast goes on. One thing I have learned with my public speaking is to avoid saying and using connecting words like so and all, drawing all that out. So if you hear a big pause from me, it's me trying to articulate my words, which I really do struggle with. So what's my story? What's my background? A few subjects I'd like to discuss over time is my story. And I also would like to bring other people onto my podcast, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So my background, I was brought up in a one-parent family. Some highlights of my life. Losing my stepfather by suicide when I was 9 years of age. I didn't really know my real father, but I did discover him at an older age, and I watched him die of cancer. He was an alcoholic and a smoker, so he got lung cancer, as you do. I'd also like to discuss how I started my first business as a painter and a decorator, and also the period in my life when leaving my faith. I used to be a Jehovah's Witness. Next thing happened, I also would like to talk about starting over from scratch and losing my older sister from suicide after living a life as a drug addict and surviving by supporting her habits as in prostitution. Building up my wealth enough to be living in the country, working from a satellite dish, and doing my internet marketing. And other subjects would be endeavouring to be perfect at the art of small bore target shooting and the psychological benefits of doing a sport like that. And then another one would be going from marriage to divorce, nearly losing my life all within 24 hours, rebuilding my career, reinventing myself, battling loneliness, running a social network, helping others. And then another turning point in my life was purchasing a business networking company and being in the business of selling franchises. And then I want to talk about the power of having a network around you in your business. And then another one I could be talking about is mastering the art of running drop shipping shops. I've always had a very strong IT background. So I hope that doesn't put you off. The goal of this blog is to get down and dirty with some real life issues and not have much of a filter. And I'd like to invite people to be on my podcast. And probably one of my biggest goals is probably to get the Prime Minister of New Zealand on the podcast. And not an interrogation, but a nice relaxed interview. And another one I wouldn't mind is getting businessmen like John Chow, if you know him, and asking him questions what drives him. So let me give you a little bit of introduction of who I am and what I do. I asked somebody to actually write an article explaining how I got into IT. So if you go to dehek.com, you'll see I've got a website there and it explains a little bit about me. I say I'm a connector, person of influence, a podcaster, and I'm sort of that guy around town who sort of knows everybody. So I was born in 1970. I left school at the age of 14. Academia was not really my forte. In fact, I didn't realise it, but I was dyslexic, and I found that quite hard. So I did sample a variety of different jobs. One that comes to mind was I got a bit of a break when I was around about 17 years of age, and a family friend actually offered me a painting and a decorating apprenticeship, so I did that. And I worked for him for 7 years, and then around I met somebody and they suggested that we go into partnership together, so I decided to start my own painting and decorating business, and I did that for about 3 years. But when I left Ray Martin Limited, he bought me a digital diary, and it sort of got me interested in technology, and I weren't very good at that. So after about 2 weeks of trying, I managed to know that little wee device inside and out, and I had about 400 or 500,000, oh not thousand, 100 contacts on it, and I quite started getting involved in technology. So when I was working with my business partner at the time, I said, "Well, how about buying a computer for the office?" And he said that was a good idea. So I started out with a 486 SX25 for those tech heads. And then I painted this guy's cafe. His name was Peter Young. And he said, "I've got a room off to the side. What do you reckon I could do with that?" And I said, "Well, why don't you start up one of those internet cafes?" And he said, "Oh, how would I go about that?" And I said, "Well, I've got this guy that just sold me a computer. He'll know how to do it." So he helped us set up 4 computers in this room. And unfortunately, Peter's business partner pulled out, which meant that he probably wasn't going to survive. And it was quite, there was an opportunity he could have gone bankrupt. But he said, "Oh, look, I formed a bit of a relationship with you, Danny." And I said, "How would you feel about going in business together and starting up a proper internet cafe?" And I said, "But you're going to go broke." And he said, "Well," I said, "I'd be interested if we started up a company, put it in my name, 100% ownership, and we'll start from there." So on a handshake, we started up a wee business called the Email Centre, which was in Christchurch on Worcester Boulevard. But what I learnt from that is people come along, and I'd look over their shoulders and ask them questions, what they were doing, and they were sending files back, photos back. One guy came in who was a freelance website developer, and he said, "Could I work for you guys for a week?" And he basically set us up with our first web page at the time. But I noticed I sort of learnt HTML, and eventually I learned how to cut and paste other people's code, drop it into mine, and how to create the basic web page. So after that, I sort of thought, well, Peter went back to Australia. The business wasn't that successful financially, but he wanted to go back to Australia and left me the business. So I sort of got rid of that. But one day, after knowing enough, I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to sell everything I own. I'm going to hitchhike around New Zealand, and I'm going to tell people I'm New Zealand's leading internet consultant, which is a pretty audacious plan. But the idea behind that was I knew enough to make myself dangerous. So I only had $300 in my name, and I literally hitchhiked around to all the tourism places in New Zealand. And I think the first job I got could have been in Wanaka or Queenstown. And I knocked on every door in Queenstown, didn't have much joy. Went over the Crown Range to Wanaka, and then I finished up knocking on a motelier's door, and they said, "Oh, you don't know anything about computers, do you?" And I said, "Oh, I do." And they said, "Oh, we're just trying to get ourselves on the internet. Can you help us?" So I did, and then I got them going, and they said, "Oh, what are you actually doing?" I said, "Oh, I develop web pages." And I said, "Oh, what are they?" "Well, for motels." "Oh, well, how about you do us one?" I said, "Yeah, okay." And then I decided I'll go get some other work while I'm there. So I finished up going to Lake Hawea, and I talked to the guy there in Lake Hawea Motor Lodge, and I said, "How about you guys doing a web page? I'm just doing one for someone in Wanaka. Would you be interested in this? Yeah, that sounds great. Then I got a phone call from Tandem Skydive Wanaka, Dave and Jules, and they said, oh, look, we really want a web page as well, but we can't afford one. How about we chuck you out of an aeroplane in exchange? And I said, oh, okay. So next thing, here I am skydiving at 9,000 feet, and it was quite good. But eventually I actually built up a whole clientele, and I went to all the remote places like Franz Josef, Waitomo, and I managed to hook some quite large clients at the time. So at that time, a rental car company would be paying $36,000 a year for a half page in the yellow pages. And here I am in New Zealand, we're charging $30 a month to get themselves on the internet. So it's pretty affordable advertising. However, not many people were using the internet. So the first 2 years of building up a client base, the internet wasn't really working like it is these days. It's an integral part of everyone's business. So I finished up building quite a large portfolio. I probably had about 100 clients, and I had 45 different rental car brands. So I formed a company called New Zealand's Information Network, and everyone would link to every other website. So rather than building all these standalone websites, I would band them all together. So you'd go to a rental car operator, and you'd see advertising of an accommodation provider. And then I'd train these accommodation providers to recommend the next motel down the chain. So if you're in Franz Josef and you're going to Fox, I'd try to get them to network together. And then the idea was to have one type of accommodation in each region of New Zealand. So I did quite well out of that. And that was around about 97, 98. And in 2004, as a one-man band, I turned over just short of $500,000 worth of turnover, and my biggest paycheck in my back pocket was about $270. So it was pretty good for somebody who left school at 14 and who also had dyslexia. So it's sort of my rant. It's one of the things I didn't talk about is living life with dyslexia and how difficult that is. And I often talk to people, on how difficult it is having a business and an idea and a concept, and then trying to be in the business world as a dyslexic person. You can't articulate yourself very well in words. I can barely pronounce words correctly, but it hasn't really held me back, and I think it enables me to think differently. So my claims to fame, I have done quite a lot in the online shopping sector. I've turned over around about $2 million worth of sales online. I have stock products. These days I specialise in drop shipping. We've got an electronics store, a camping store, and also an accessory store like cell phone covers. And we do really well with those shops. So I want to talk about all those sort of subjects. I don't want to bore you to death. I do want to get other people on here. I want some topics. As Gary always says, please share, subscribe. It makes a huge difference to have people following you. My main passion is a little business networking company, which I've been working with since 2013, and that's called Elite 6. It used to be set up as a franchise, and I used to be in the job of selling franchises. Then I got involved in it and coming up with better systems on how to run our business groups. And long story short, now I run all the meetings bar one, and we run think tank meetings on a Friday. So we have around about 120 people involved in our community, so to speak. And on a Friday we get them together and we discuss topics, and we record them and put them on a podcast. And I've been doing that for the last 2 or 3 months, and it's been going really well. So the purpose of this podcast is more of a personal rant. Problems, things, obstacles I've had that I feel I've applied myself in certain areas, and I can, help others. So feel free to give me comments. Do check out my website, as everyone wants you to. But more importantly, I want to help people be a better version of themselves. And that's what I've been working on lately. So I'm self-educated. I've just discovered audiobooks, and I say just, probably about 4 or 5 years. I've got about 85 different audiobooks I love, and I always get some little gem out of them. So my big focus is really to give you some gem every time you listen to my podcast. Alright, so I look forward to you tuning in, and don't forget, please subscribe and share my content, because I'll share yours.